We are about to start another heart butt challenge. So I'm just going to demonstrate a heart butt exercise, just the regular old glute maximus. We can talk about what you should be feeling on the inside. So first things first, we have to think about the glutes in terms of what they actually do. So we're talking about the glute maximus, which is the big muscle, big meaty muscle right here in the back. Okay, so watch, I can literally lift my leg with my back and never ever fire the glute. So when you're firing the glute, remember that you're supposed to keep your transverse abs pulled up against gravity, and then you can only go in the range of motion that you actually have hip extension. So if you're way up here, most people don't have that amount of hip extension. In fact, some people can't even get to neutral here. So what you should feel is your abs being pulled up against gravity or against your ball, and then you just do a teeny bit of hip extension, re-engage the abs, and when you're holding that, you should physically see the glute pop up. Did you see it? That's off. That's on. And what firing feels like is kind of a burn. So I want you to try that exercise. Lift the leg, pull the transverse abs in, try to turn everything else off, and see if you can't get that kind of burn or fire feeling in your glute. You don't want to hold your weight in the leg. You want to go ahead and put your weight in the ball. This right leg, even though I'm lifting the left, look, I at any point should be able to pick up this right leg. So I'm not using my weight into the right hip capsule. I'm balancing onto my pelvis. And if it cramps, then obviously you need to get out of it and then go back in. Even if you're here, you don't have to be way up here. As long as your abs are engaged and your butt is on, this may be your range of motion. Down here, not even at neutral hip. Remember, hip extension, meaning from here to whatever position you can get in, hip extension is the action of the glute. So even from the floor to here is hip extension. I want you to go to whatever range you can to where you feel a hard firing contraction, but you don't feel trying to cheat or shifting the weight or having to compromise and get in your back. Okay, so this little bitty bit right here might be your range of motion. And people feel like they're not working out, but that little tiny motion, if it turns on your glute and lets it fire, is going to give you a better result than 10,000 squats. So what you would do is you would take a breath in, line everything up. I'm all about those railroad tracks. Then the first thing that would happen was after you breathe in, you'd exhale, and as you're exhaling, you'd feel your abs first, then your glute, and then the lift. Okay? So I'm firing my glute isometrically before I even move. Okay? So again, it'd be breathe in, exhale, find the abs, relax the shoulders, find the pelvic floor, find the glute, then lift up. So if I had it in an Ashley perfect world, it'd be breathe in, breathe out, send that breath to the transverse abs, up the pelvic floor, into the glute, hit the movement, and then surge through transverse abs, pelvic floor, and glutes. The second question that we typically get asked is, what do you do if you don't feel them? What you should do is get in a position that makes it fire. So even if you're here and your movement is just this, and all I'm doing is holding, I'm squeezing my abs, and I'm squeezing that glute, and in my mind, I'm doing everything I can to relax my foot, relax my calf, relax my hamstring, and just feel the butt. Then this is a really good technique for trying to get the glutes or any muscle on, just tapping it and trying to squeeze it, and then letting the whole rest of your body go limp besides just that booty muscle. This exercise can be done here, right? still hip extension. It could be done in, this position here against gravity. It could be done in this position here against gravity. It can be done here. As long as the hips are stable, then it doesn't really matter the angle of hip flexion. Most people, when they go to do hip extension, they do this and arch their back. So when we do hip extension, the key is that this pelvis has got to be neutral, which is why I've been such a psycho about the wall test, because even on my most flexible leg, that's about all the hip extension that I have. And the key is to stay here. The minute I do this, you saw it, the glute just went right off. So I gotta have my abs on and my glute on. Third question that we typically hear is, what if other muscles come on? It's very common in biomechanics to accidentally pair muscles and then have to unpair them. One of the things that you'll notice about my program is I don't incorporate a bent leg, because to me, if that leg is bending, then my brain is getting signaled to use the hamstring. So the first thing that I would say in terms of any of the exercises for heart bed is that you want to keep the legs straight, because the minute you do this, to me it's just Cheatersville. That's why I don't love these machines that do that, because they're kind of like part hamstring, part glute. So the first thing you can do is keep the legs straight, and then as you lift, if you just move slow enough to hold, surge, and then really shake out the foot, shake out the hamstring, and make sure that you're just holding it with just that glute and your abs. The easiest thing for a muscle to do is to fire isometrically. Then the next easiest is concentric, and then the hardest is eccentric. Isometric just means you're holding. So if you're having trouble turning it on, don't just do 15 leg lifts, do one, hold it. Turn off everything else. Make sure you're firing in your core. Surge through it. Think of it more like a forced meditation than a lift. So the main reason that low backs hurt is because you don't have enough hip extension, and you just physically cannot lift your leg into hip extension beyond neutral without using your back. Okay, so the first thing that I would say is that you really need to get on blasting and opening the front of the hips. Blast, pull out hips, and then this stretch here, getting into that hip extension. If your low back tends to hurt, it's not necessarily because you have a back problem, it's because you don't have the hip extension, so your body says, okay, well, I'll do it with my back. Okay, so first of all, open that hip. Second of all, when you're starting heart butt, if you don't have that range of motion yet, just let this be your range of motion. Okay, just keep it down low, and you should be able to do that without feeling your back. And the minute you get up high enough that you feel your back come on, you can put your hand on it. The minute it starts to come on, just drop the leg completely and redo. Get in those abs and just cut that range of motion off. I'm still working my glute, even though I'm way down low. So the last question that I had written down that I heard you guys asking this week is, what if your transverse abs goes off? Okay, so let me just revisit what transverse abs is. It is the muscle that is responsible for, once we get in neutral pelvis, you want to draw your abs towards your back. If I turn off my transverse abs, it's just instantly like my stomach's out. So it's this action, and it should be on all the time. For one, you gotta continually condition your transverse abs so it stays on. But when you're in the actual glute exercise, so say no matter where we are with our hip extension and our glute and our transverse abs on, when we're exercising, we want a level 10 of the glute and we want a level 10 of the transverse abs. And if they keep going off, get out of the exercise and redo it. It doesn't matter if I'm doing a bicep curl or an overhead press or whatever. I am almost not even thinking about my arms. I'm thinking about the position of the pelvis, and that's training my abs, because keeping your transverse abs on when you're doing whatever it is that you're doing, right, is difficult. But once you really get this as part of your posture, every single step I take, my butt is firing. So even though I'm not intentionally like going glute, 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 just by the nature of having a neutral pelvis, my glute is contracting in the back. So I would encourage you, when you're doing the heart butt challenge, to not only do the exercises, but also really work on neutral pelvis and abs, and working those glutes when you take a step. Basically, the butt and the abs go hand in hand. So it's not just about heart butt exercises, it's about taking heart butt know-how and using it in all of your workouts.